Hello, everyone. We are now moving on from informative speeches to your persuasive speeches. So, this is when you are making an argument. These are more argumentative speeches. So, argumentative speeches fall under the umbrella of persuasive speaking. So does motivational speaking fall under persuasive speaking. This speech you will make an argument. So we're going to go over chapter 12, which is persuasive speaking. And then we are going to also talk about how to apply that to your argumentative speech. So your next speech, it's titled persuasive, but really this is just crafting an argument. How do you craft an argument? Okay, let's move on. So the concepts we're going to kind of talk about, persuasion versus manipulation, and that's a big thing to understand. Um, Types of proof, ethos, pathos, and logos, and we're going to learn that you have to kind of have all three aspects to craft a really persuasive speech, a good persuasive speech. Making connections, the process of reasoning. How do you lead your audience through? Different types of arguments we're going to discuss. When reasons go bad, like logical fallacies, the ad hominem, the uh, um, red herring, those sorts of things. And those are all things that you have already probably learned a lot about in English composition, because the logical fallacies are in English comp as well as, and they are the same. And then dealing with counter arguments, we've kind of already begun to talk about inoculation theory and how you have to present counter arguments to your audience for credibility's sake, so that they know that you know about them, so that your expertise is not questioned, those sorts of things. All right, so let's continue on. So types of appeals, ethos, pathos, logos, or a combination. So we all know these are the Latin terms. Ethos, pathos, and logos really is, logic, credibility, and emotion. So do you make a logical argument? Do you have like a well-reasoned, um, logical, lead your audience through logically? Do you make an emotional argument where you're uh, pulling on their heartstrings? Or do you, and your credibility, do are you a credible speaker? Does that lend itself, or do you use some combination? As research shows, really the most persuasive arguments do have a combination of ethos, pathos, and logos. So we're going to talk, there are times when really you can lead more with emotion, and you can lean into the emotion of the topic a little bit more depending upon who's in your audience. There are other times when logic rules the school, and you have to have very strong sources and a very logical argument to lead your audience through, and there's different times when those come into play. So the book does break down each of these: ethos, um, um, good judgment, common sense, uh, goodwill. This is, your, your character. Um, you want to explain the importance, of your topic. You want to have your listeners show goodwill to you and show goodwill to your listeners. You want to be perceived as good and a virtuous person. Pathos is more of the emotional side, sympathy. Sometimes, we see like the save the puppies, which is the Sarah McLachlan song comes on. We see the little one-eyed puppy, and we say, oh, for just 25 cents a day, you can give these wonderful animals, a better life, or you can give them wheelchairs, whatever they are asking you to do. That is a very sympathetic argument, right? It plays to your emotions. If you are a person that doesn't like animals, no matter what puppy they put on the beginning of that advertisement, you're never going to donate to the ASPCA. So you are not their audience, and they are really playing to the animal lovers out there. So that's to the audience. They already know that, they can wrap into donations to action. And that's really when we're talking about motivational speeches versus just persuasive speeches. But many times we make very heartfelt, emotional arguments that sway individuals from being very neutral to being very much on your side. It's rare that emotion sways individuals from being against you to being with you, but emotion can bring a neutral audience member to your side. Uh, so Yeah, so emotional arguments do lend themselves to the call for action, the motivational speech. When we talk about Monroe's motivated sequence, you will definitely see that there is emotion there. And we do, research has been shown that we really actually don't make any decision without emotions. Demassier has done a lot of research where he um, has like severed the relationship between like your emotional brain and your logical brain. And even if your logical brain is still functioning, if you don't have the emotional side, you never pull the trigger, you can't make the decision. So really our emotions really are what makes us actually take action. So research is out there showing that, and I may put the Demassier research study clip up for you guys to watch, just so that you know, if you want to persuade somebody, you have to have some element of emotion there. And then pathos are, you know, fear appeals, identifies the threats, frames the situation. Um, these are, when you use negative emotions, when you show the little one-eyed dog. So there's also the positive side where you're um, really just a cheerleader. If you're in a room full of your supporters, rah rah sis boom ba, you kind of already have them on your side, so you can lead them to motivate to take action, a specific action. So if you have a room full of people that already agree with you and you want them to donate money, those are the moments where emotion really can open their pocketbooks and get the donations. If you're sitting in a room full of people that don't necessarily agree with you, those emotions aren't going to matter as much. You're going to have to use reasoning and logic. So there's the logos. Um, this is the logical side of developing your arguments. So there's reasons. Your claims are backed up by research and information. They use reasoning to persuade the audience. They use evidence. They use statistics. It's very well organized. It moves through. It states very clearly what you're talking about and how you're moving through the different pieces of your speech. There's a lot of citations. When your audience is against you, you tend to have to rely very heavily on the logos, the backed up evidence-based strategy for persuasion. Because when people don't want to believe you, uh, they're going to try and find holes in your argument. And the first thing, the easy killer for arguments is, oh, they're too emotional. That person is too emotional. They don't have any logic behind their argument. That's not well reasoned. Well, so if your audience is against, if your audience is with you, you can do the cheerleading and be a very emotional, motivational speaker. If your audience is against you, you have to have the logical side. You have to have the research. You have to cite all of the sources all the time, every time, and they have to be credible, well-known sources. So make sure you know the difference. If your claim is that, marijuana should be legal, well, it's an old claim. All drugs should be legalized. That's your claim. If you're sitting in a room full of people that love the idea of having all drugs available without a prescription, or with a prescription at every pharmacy, so you can get your LSD and your Diet Coke simultaneously, you have to you can make a very emotional argument for that. But if you are in a room full of people that is skeptical about legalizing all drugs, then you're going to have to rely heavily on logic. So in that, you have to make the connections. You use inductive reasoning, which is like our arguments from examples, and we all know this, and you know these things from your English composition course. Deductive reasoning, where you deduce from kind of a larger perspective to a smaller specific example. Causal relationships, causation. And we did have a little conversation about causation versus correlation. Things that are correlated are not necessarily cause, but you have to make sure you address those things. Arguments from analogy, arguments from sign, arguments from authority, all of these need to be, used to help you in your logical reasoning, especially when your audience does not agree with you. So inductive arguments, draw conclusions from examples. They are best with more general claims. Deductive reasonings are more of the if X, then Y. So like inductive reasoning would be like McDonald's is not good for you, Wendy's is not good for you, fast food in general is not good for you. I'm only giving you 2 examples. Is that enough to decide that fast food is not good for you? I don't know. Deductive reasoning starts with more general claim. Fast food is not good for you. Arby's is fast food. Therefore, Arby's is not good for you. So do you see the difference there? Causal relationships, when we talked about causation a little bit in class. So, make sure that you are specifically showing, smoking causes cancer. Does it? Or is there really just a correlation between people that smoke and people that end up with cancer? Because the person that is the smoker in the room who doesn't want to quit is going to say, wait a second, I know people that have smoked their whole lives and never gotten cancer. So how can you say that smoking causes cancer? So you have to make sure you can show correlation, show causation. Otherwise, you're just showing correlation, and people will nail you, especially when they're against you. When your audience is not with you, you've got to make sure all your ducks line up for that. So arguments from analogy, comparing two things, similar claims between the two. This is where they say, in all of it, in English and all of it, make sure you're comparing apples to apples. Don't compare apples to oranges. So like when they were trying to legalize gambling in the state of Ohio, they were talking about Cleveland and Cincinnati, and they were saying, all these terrible things happen in Las Vegas, Nevada, prostitution and indebtedness and bankruptcy and all of these things happen there. And that's all going to happen right here in the state of Ohio. And Cleveland is going to be the next cesspool of sin. You want to say, you're not really comparing apples to apples. There's so many things that are different in Northeast Ohio than in Las Vegas. So uh, make sure you're comparing apples to apples to make a clear logical argument. So arguments from signs, they attempt to project future events. So oftentimes physicians use signs for diagnosis, right? If you have high blood pressure and high cholesterol and are diabetic, you have a greater potential for cardiovascular disease. So they will diagnose. So basically they say, if these symptoms line up, this is what your diagnosis is. So really that's kind of the greatest way to explaining arguments from signs. So you have a highly correlated relationship. It requires, factual support. And it could be, false and inappropriate. Sometimes those signs get it wrong, dead wrong. So sorry, my son is singing in the other room. So, sea cruise. So I'm gonna have to stop this recording and have him be quiet. So when you are using argument from authority, either you are the authority or there are sources that are using that are the authority. Argument from authority is very useful. It shows expertise. It shows that you have to make sure that you show that they are legitimate sources. So, if you're going to cite Kim Kardashian on what shoes to wear for winter or spring, great source. If you're going to cite Kim Kardashian on the future of constitutional law, maybe not a great source there. So make sure you are using legitimate sources and make sure they have expertise and you have expertise. Let's continue. We are almost finished. All right, we are almost finished. So when we are talking about logical fallacies, we know the ad hominem fallacy, which is to the person, to the man, really. That is when you attack another person rather than attacking their argument. You do want to address counter arguments, but you don't want to address them as that's so stupid or they're so stupid. So you probably all, and I know I've done it and I've seen my kids do it, they disagree with each other. But so my daughter will say one thing and then my son will say something counter and then my daughter will say, oh my God, you're so stupid. That is a logical fallacy. That does not address the argument that they are having. That attacks the person. It's called ad hominem. An inappropriate appeals to authority is a logical fallacy. Make sure that they are authority on the actual topic that you are talking about, not an authority in general. Ad consequentium, which is a logical fallacy of consequences. A lot of times, like the things like slippery slope, like if we legalize all drugs, we will all be drug addicts. Like they use the slippery slope. That's like the appeal to consequences. We couldn't possibly, if we legalize murder, everyone will murder. Well, maybe, I don't know. Sometimes I get behind those bad drivers and I think, I'm kidding. Uh, so don't make a false statement or fall into one of the logical fallacies. Appeals to tradition. That's, I guess, one that people say we should keep things the way they are because that's the way we've always done them. That's the tradition. That doesn't speak logically to anything. We should keep things the way we've always done them. There has to be a reason because we don't have money to change them, or the time that would be involved to change them wouldn't end up resulting in a return on our investment, whatever it is. But it can't just be because that's the way we've always done it. It's the thing that I always use with my son. I often think don't do that, and he says why, and I said because I said so. That doesn't really give him much, although I am an expert. Post hoc ergo, what is that? Propter hoc. That is saying like what is coming first. Really, that's a causation. That's saying this happened because, or again, we talked about make sure you have actual causation and not false causation. So circular reasoning, and this is just the regular course. You want to make sure that you build it and your argument is not circular. It's a logical fallacy. People fall into it, but you have to make sure you're checking as you are building your argumentative speech. You want to make sure that you have clear reasoning and development. So in summary, you want to make sure you use ethos, pathos, and logos. You want to present yourself as a credible speaker. You want to use credible sources. You want to connect emotionally to your audience. You want logical connections and using sound logic and reasoning. You want to address counter arguments so your audience knows that you are aware of them. So that is all that we're going to talk about in this chapter. But there are other videos that I do want you to watch in regards to persuasive speaking.